Hi, it's me, Kimberly Clark, the original de-influencer, and I'm using my experience as an anti-consumerist YouTube beauty guru to help you realize that you are more than the material. This is how to stop shopping in 5 easy steps.
It's what I'm not gonna buy, just to be not gonna lie. I am more than this, I am so much more.
Flapper dress made by Mavin Giamo, dancing like a flapper. Do some Lindy for me. Do some Lindy. That's beautiful, Grandma.
It's one of my designs.
Wow. This is my grandmother, Madeline. She was a first-generation Italian-American, the daughter of 2 Sicilian immigrants who left their homeland and came to the U.S. with the promise of wealth and opportunity at the turn of the 20th century. Like so many European immigrants at that time, they didn't come here with much in terms of possessions and were considered other in American society. They needed to convince the folks that were here that they indeed could fit in and assimilate. Unfortunately, part of that involved leaving behind their language and some of their traditions, but it also meant looking the part. We often consider the overwhelming pressure to look or dress a certain way as something new, but for decades, fashion greatly affected how you were able to participate in society. And when you're an Italian immigrant trying to become an American, dressing to the nines was fundamental. But this was a time before fast fashion. If you saw some trendy new look in the paper, you couldn't just swing by the mall and pick up a cheap mass-produced version in your size or favorite color. So you'd make it. Today, we think of custom-made garments as a luxury, but not too long ago, most families had someone or knew someone locally that could either tailor or repair store-bought garments, or even sew garments from scratch. This was the most economical way to stay in fashion and to make your garments last. So my great-grandmother taught my grandmother, Madeline, to sew. And when she started her own family, Madeline would spend her night sewing in her living room, which was also her bedroom, making outfits for her children, for her sisters, or anyone else that lived in their tiny, crowded apartment. And because of her amazing eye and incredible resourcefulness, she was able to keep everyone looking stylish, and therefore setting them up for success in our family's new homeland. When I was younger, she taught me to sew, and even though she might not have approved of my fashion choices, i.e. sewing bell-bottom inserts into brightly colored corduroy trousers, I could tell she was excited to pass some of this legacy of making down to me. Today, it seems like we can get anything we want delivered to our door with just one click, but this convenience limits the depth of our understanding of where the things we buy come from and how they're made. Because of this, our sense of value is severely distorted. By not appreciating how things are made, we don't have any way to know how much things are really worth. Companies can exploit this ignorance by utilizing the cheapest and most exploitative manufacturing processes to make the consumer believe they're getting a great deal. What's more, the instant replaceability and cheapness of most of our possessions makes us less likely to take proper care of what we do have. If, by appreciating making, we can reestablish our connection to the objects we already possess, we won't be forced to constantly seek newer, better versions of them. Or, when we do need to replace something, we understand the value enough to buy a product that will last. So, how do we begin to really appreciate how the things we interact with are made? Let's break down the process of making into 3 parts: the manufacturing process and its history, the skill required to make something, and the people that make it. 1. The process. The easiest way to learn about various manufacturing processes and histories of industries is right in front of you. There are YouTube videos describing manufacturing processes for almost every product, and there are tons of great explainer videos describing how industries run. Just in the way we looked at selling from a company's point of view, learning the nuances of how certain products are designed, manufactured, and distributed can help you be more informed and think critically about your purchases. If you're interested in learning about the fashion industry, for example, I recommend checking out Zoe Hong's channel. She has a great video that describes how garments are designed differently depending on who they are marketed to, in terms of how much fabric is used, how much detail is featured, and how intricate the construction processes are. For an even deeper dive into the fast fashion industry, pick up Aja Barber's book, Consumed: The Need for Collective Change, Colonialism, Climate Change, and Consumerism. She describes the ways fast fashion has psychologically distorted our reality and goes in depth into how brands exploit factory workers, as well as the environmental costs of clothing manufacturing and synthetic fabrics. If you pick up Aja's book, though, do me a favor and order it from a local bookstore and not from Amazon, okay? Thanks. As for cosmetics, there are a lot of videos that talk about the manufacturing process, but many of those are created by or in collaboration with the brands themselves. I think channels like Refinery29 are doing some great independent reporting, exposing some really difficult truths regarding the beauty industry, which we'll discuss more in a moment. But the best rule when looking for accurate sources of information is to make sure that they are as unbiased as possible. Just like how we can't necessarily trust product reviews that are sponsored, but that's our job. We can't trust industries that benefit from concealing their unethical aspects to willfully expose themselves. If you find any legitimate sources and channels that go behind the scenes in various industries, feel free to share them in the comments of this video. 2. The skills. Learning about the workings of an industry is one thing, but the fundamental skill set required to make things is a whole other bag. Of course, there are also millions of how-to videos here on this platform, but the best way to understand how something is made is to make it yourself. A few years ago, I took on my first advanced beginner sewing project in making a petticoat with a strapless bodice from a pattern by Gretchen Hirsch, whose books I highly recommend if you want to start or get back into sewing. I wanted the perfect undergarment for some of the 50s style full skirt dresses that I had in my wardrobe, or I had made, like this one. I have unusual measurements because, well, I'm a drag queen, so finding a perfect fitting pre-made petticoat with a bodice would have been very difficult or very expensive. So I figured making it myself was the best option. Now, up until this point, I had made several dresses, but this was next level. It had a bodice with princess seams, added boning, and a multi-tiered ruffled skirt. The task was not without its frustrations. I indeed had several breakdowns on my dining room table after sewing a seam backwards or having to remake the entire bodice because I incorrectly measured my waist. But ultimately, after much labor, I had myself a custom-fitted petticoat that I could wear with several of my pre-existing wardrobe items, all for the total cost of around $95, including the pattern, fabric, and notions. After I completed the project, I looked on Amazon just to see how much generic petticoats were going for, and I was shocked to see some available for prices as low as $20. I mean, my fabric alone cost around $70, so I knew that either the advertised item was crafted with much lower quality materials, less fabric, resulting in a less poofy petticoat, or was manufactured by people who weren't paid a living wage, or worse, weren't paid at all. Because I had taken the time and effort to learn how to make a garment, I not only gained a deep appreciation and understanding for the process of making, but I was able to put myself in the position of the maker and learn how valuable their skills truly were. I gained a new kind of empathy for those responsible for making my clothing, and how much it should cost for me to purchase items, if everyone that played a part in making them was to be paid accordingly. And the broader my awareness became, the more difficult it was for me to ignore one of the most abhorrent side effects of global capitalism: forced labor. 3. The people. According to the Global Slavery Index, on any given day in 2021, approximately 50 million people worldwide were living in situations of modern slavery, with around 27.6 million in forced labor. This is a horrifying statistic and can seem overwhelming. I mean, especially here in the US, it's easy for us to say, well, not in my backyard, because most of the people who are affected by these unethical practices just aren't here. But the industries that benefit from global forced labor definitely are. As consumers, we are constantly buying things that may very well have been manufactured by forced laborers. And in fact, you probably are surrounded by products who at least have a component that was either sourced, assembled, or shipped unethically. The US is by far the largest importer of goods that are potentially manufactured under modern slavery conditions, importing $170 billion worth annually, $108 billion of which are in the form of electronics. It's very likely that the cobalt used in the lithium-ion battery powering the device you are watching this video on was mined by people, many of them children working under modern slavery conditions. And it's not just the garment and electronic industries that are engaged in what Aja Barber calls a race to the bottom, i.e. companies seeking out cheaper and cheaper manufacturing processes regardless of labor conditions to be able to offer better deals to their consumers. Almost every industry in this global capitalist system has unethical links in their supply chain, and the cosmetics industry is no exception. India is the largest exporter of mica as used in the beauty industry. This raw material in powder form is used to add shine and luster in everything from foundations to eyeshadows to lipsticks. A 2019 study found that 70% of the mica mines in India were illegally operated, which means that they are free from oversight or regulation. Many of these mines employ children because they are small enough to fit into the cave openings. And this is just one report of many concerning unethical practices in the acquisition of raw materials for makeup. But of course, there have been all kinds of movements and increasing consciousness about sustainability and ethics in all industries, including beauty. But often the human cost of raw materials is obscured by other issues. It's frankly what has always bothered me about an obsession with cruelty-free makeup, which of course refers to makeup that is not lab tested on animals. Obviously, animal testing is an inhumane and unnecessary practice, but so are children working in mines. If a product wasn't tested on a bunny, but contains mica mined by children, is it really cruelty-free? Or is cruelty towards animals simply harder to swallow than cruelty to children, as long as they don't look like me? The fact is, most people working under modern slavery conditions are members of the global majority, or in other words, are not white. Because white supremacy is so pervasive, and one of the tools of white supremacy is to dehumanize anyone that isn't considered white, human rights abuses against Black, brown, indigenous people, and people of color, and of the global South, are easily disregarded. A white influencer supporting cruelty-free products while using makeup in which the raw material was mined by non-white children is a peak example of the problematic hypocrisy of white privilege. For more info on this, check out my video on white privilege as part of my Listen Up series. Bottom line is, to truly appreciate how things are made means confronting some harsh truths about who is exploited in the process. And not just by forced labor, but also by climate change, which is being fueled by our manufacturing and shipping industries. If we put our foot down and refuse to accept this unethical way of being, it will also mean adjusting our expectations and how we value things. We may have to forgo this immediate convenience of 1 or 2 day shipping we've come to rely on, or the ultra-low prices of items we commonly purchase. We will have to spend more money on the things we are accustomed to paying less for, and wait longer to get things that are currently available instantaneously. But not everyone is in a position to change their consumer habits. What if we know it's wrong, but we simply can't afford to change the system? Barber responds to this critique of ethical consumerism in Consumed, i.e. the idea that it's a luxury many can't afford. Sure, it'd be great to save up and buy a pair of boots that would last versus a pair you'll have to replace every year, but what if you need those boots now and can't afford to save and wait? It is true that the exploitative systems of global capitalism keep the poorest of the poor stuck in a depressed economic situation, but it's safe to say that you, dear viewer, are in a financial situation that is more mutable than the worst off of us on a global scale. This means that you're in a unique position to demand more from the companies you support with the money you choose or choose not to spend. After all, if what we purchase is how we communicate with companies, every inconsiderate dollar we spend on a product that comes from ethically questionable sources is not only a waste of our money, but an endorsement of practices that are killing people and our planet. This is why a devaluing of consumerism itself is incredibly impactful. Companies rely on this fundamental societally enforced drive to consume, but it's us, the consumers, who have the loudest voice in the conversation. We can amplify ideas that are more valuable and sustainable than consumerism, and we need to if we want our planet and all the people living on it to survive. By appreciating making, we begin to accept that the ripples of our consumption reach far beyond our bubbles, our friends, our family, or our followers. And this accountability is power that can not only connect us to a global community, but also allow us to feel more centered in ourselves. Learning about the stories of where we are and what we buy and focusing on the skills required to make the products that make us into who we are can actually make our lives richer and more nuanced. It can help us understand the power our actions have in the world because we are quite literally all in this together. It's about time we start accepting that and leading by example. Appreciate how things are made and move forward with that knowledge, even if it means dismantling the systems that seem impossible to reform, even in yourself. Congratulations! You've completed step 2 of How to Stop Shopping in 5 Easy Steps. Appreciate making. If you'd like to support me and my work, consider sending me a tip on Venmo at Kim Clark Queen, or join the House of Clark by becoming a patron of mine on Patreon. Thanks to everyone that's continued to support me over the years. I wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, and I'll meet you at step 3. Find the roots of your compulsion. As always, I'm Kimberly Clark. Bye!
Material